So, hello and welcome to another episode of Interviews with Experts. Today, my very special guest is Dr. Ferhat Ozturk. Dr. Ozturk is the project director of the Honey Pathway in the Department of Integrative Biology at the University of Texas, San Antonio. What if I told you that putting honey on your teeth could heal your gums or strengthen tooth enamel? Or how about medical grade honey that heals when traditional treatments fail? What plants are producing the most medicinally potent raw honey? Well, we cover all of these topics and more in this fascinating interview. Today is February the 12th of 2025. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is The Way to Be. Okay, so hello and welcome, Ferhat. I want to thank you for joining me today for this Way to Be discussion. This is a very important topic, and Dr. Robin Underwood spoke highly of you and says that you have collaborated on some of the topics that she's dealing with spotted lanternfly honey, in fact, honeydew honey. So
Yes.
if you would please just tell us a little bit about where you're currently located, what your job is today, and what you do for a living.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. Currently I am at University of Texas, San Antonio, and I live in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm currently the project director of the Honey Pathway, which is funded by USDA's Next Gen program. And also I'm an associate professor of instruction. So I teach Biosciences 1, which is the introductory biology for the science majors. And also I'm teaching medicinal properties of honey as a research class for the biology and other students.
Okay, great. So we met. Thank you so much for introducing yourself to me, by the way, down in Austin, Texas, for the Texas State Beekeepers Association Conference.
Mhm.
That was great, and I'm sorry I didn't have much time to talk then, and you didn't either because you were very busy yourself. But this is a fantastic area to be researching, and so I think it's something that a lot of people misunderstand and even may not, they may attribute things to honey as far as health benefits go that don't exist, that aren't true, just as well as they might miss some of the attributes that absolutely are beneficial to people in particular. So, would you talk a little bit about what honey is? Because we have to assume that some people just don't even know. And then again, what is it about honey that makes it useful in medicine?
Sure. I mean, honey is when the nectar is converted by the honeybees, that the nectar is collected from the flower blossoms or from the secretion of the plants or excretion of the insects. So honeybees collect this nectar and which is sucrose. So it converts into glucose and fructose and puts them into a high concentration sugar with low moisture. And then it's a sweet substance that we use for millennia or even more than that. And honey has been used as a medicine for thousands of years, more than as a food, because honey was hard to harvest. Because even today we have honey hunters in Turkey or in Nepal or in other countries. So which means that honey was hunted for thousands of years or hundreds of years until the Egyptians were able to domesticate the honeybees and started using them for the agriculture throughout the Nile. So, and then, so honey was mostly found in the homes of the healers or at that time medical doctors, and it was used either as is, as a medical device and as a medical application, or it was used as a base to be mixed and, with other medicinal plants or items. So again, honey was mostly used as a medicine, and it's also well known as the nectar of gods in the Egyptians. So it is all because of its rarity and also its medicinal benefits.
Okay, that's very interesting. I'm going to throw you a curveball here. Since you're
Sure.
mentioning Egypt, okay, because a lot of people like to quote, and this is one of the things that I'm having a hard time finding scientific proof of, and that's the honey that they attribute to being found in King Tut's tomb in
In
Egypt.
1922. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but then when you try to track that down, there's no inventory of that in the archive in Cairo. Do you think honey has that kind of lasting ability in a clay pot, or what?
I mean, honey has that lasting ability as long as it is kind of protected from direct light and then heat. So honey will not spoil for like even hundreds of years. Again, we don't have an experiment that we can show. Our life is not enough, I think, for that. But the honey that is found in the clay pot in King Tutankhamun's tomb was an evidence that honey doesn't spoil. But to be honest, yes, you are right. The only information I found, and most of the information I found, is it was discovered during the digging of the or opening of the tomb, and then they found honey in 1922. Actually, it's about almost 100 years ago, and that's the anecdotal evidence. But again, I did not see where the honey is located. Probably it should be in the British Museum, because I know most of the items were moved to British Museum, like to be shown to the audience. But again, I don't know where it's exactly now. And again, I also read over some articles that it was analyzed for its unique, like for its completeness, it is still honey. But again, I don't have a direct scientific evidence that where the honey is and what are the properties of that honey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think we're very interested because obviously if it's in someone's tomb, and there was some spectral analysis done to prove that the container had residue of honey or bits of wax, and so that's what they speculate that that's what was in it. And so it was considered a medicine thousands of years ago, and we probably don't know a lot about how they might have used it. So
I
how
mean,
far back does your research go in antiquity as far as medicine goes?
I mean, the oldest one I think that we know is there are some okay, in some tablets of the Sumerians lived in Mesopotamia. They mention about using honey for some diseases, but again, I don't have all the anthropological evidence
Right.
information for
Yeah.
it. But
I don't
also
realize.
about 500 papyri in the Egyptian papyrus, like which were discovered by Edwin. I think it was called Edwin's papyrus. So they found out like Egyptians mention about honey and honeybees in about 500 pages of their of their hieroglyphs, also in the hieroglyphs, but also in the papyri that they have. And also there are some texts from the Indian. Vishnu. I forgot the exact name, but in the Vedas, I don't know how much all the Vedas were written in text, but yes, in the Hittites in Anatolia that they live, they also have some text that mentions about the use of honey for medical purposes, but which means about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago.
Right. Wow. So then I have to ask, why is this something that you are personally interested in, and what made you think that today that this is the time to be really advancing that research?
I mean, my background is in cell and molecular biology. So I did my PhD in gene therapy as I was studying about how we can change the genes of the pregnant sheep so that we can fix a disease during the gestation. So then I moved to Nebraska Medical Center and Creighton University as well. So I studied about cardiovascular gene therapy. Then I studied about cleft palate. So we had a mouse model that we were trying to fix the cleft palate during the pregnancy in the mother's womb, like it was a mid gestation. So that's how I kind of started interested in wound healing, because the cleft palate is basically there are two palatal shells that go vertical first, and then they go horizontal, and they meet in the center, and they become a confluent palate. So if the palate is not confluent, which means that if the wound is not healed completely, then when the face grows during the embryogenesis, so it will split and it will become a cleft palate. So the mechanism in this palatogenesis is the epithelial cells, which is covering these shells, they need to be converted or transited into mesenchymal cells, which is moving, like immobile cells becomes mobile. And then by this way, this is the confluent palate is occurred. So the same mechanism is also seen in the cancer, in the metastasis. When the cancer cells needs to move from one location to another one, they need to be mobile. So they are transited from epithelial to mesenchymal. and also the same thing in fibrosis and so forth. So I was like, then I found out it's the wound healing mechanism. Actual wound healing mechanism is the main sourse of this epithelial mesenchymal transition. So when I studied about wound healing, I came across that honey is one of the most advanced wound healers for thousands of years, used by almost every civilization on Earth. And I was reading those articles. And then also, I'm a Muslim by practice. So when I was reading the religious scripture, the Quran, that there's a verse, it says very openly that within the bellies of the honeybees there is a healing for humankind. So, and then this is definitely referring to the honey within the bellies of the honeybees, and it's a varying color, and these varying colors can have a healing for different diseases. It's a kind of also my motivational point. So my scientific background and also my cultural religious background, it's kind of all motivated me to, go into the honey research. And then, and meanwhile, I got an offer from my hometown in Turkey that they were establishing a honey research center in 2012. And the university's president, he came to a conference in Chicago, and he was meeting with possible candidates to become faculty in the new university. And interestingly enough, I mean, they were opening molecular biology and genetics department, and Honey Research Center will be under their department. So it was fitting perfectly with my scientific background, and also honey is something coming new to me at that time. So when I get more involved, okay, I approved the offer to become an assistant professor, and eventually I become a department chair in the same department. And then when I moved to Turkey, like I found out people are highly interested in honey as a medicine, because Turkey's location is in Anatolia, and Anatolia has been a cradle of civilizations. And the Sumerians and Hittites or other civilizations, like they'd lived in Anatolia, they have a lot of like evidences that they use honey for medical purposes, and especially Avicenna or Ibn Sina. So Avicenna's book, The Canon of Medicine, which is the 5-volume of medical textbook that was used during the Renaissance in Europe for about 500 years. So in the second volume is about pharmacology, and Avicenna describes more than 35 different recipes using honey for wound healing, for cough, or even some neurological disorders. So all these things, like I keep learning about honey as the people visit the honey center, or as I learned through my professor Kamruddin Muhammad Yusuf. So he's a Malaysian professor, and he worked on honey for about 30 years since his postdoc. And then he also instilled the love of honey in me. And also my university's president, Professor Bekdemir, he also helped me a lot. He's an organic chemist. So a biochemist, organic chemist, and cell biologist. So we get together and we just kind of keep digging to better understand medicinal properties of honey. And people showed a lot of interest in it, especially, again, I learned that honey is, eventually I realized that honey touches everybody's life, like younger or older, or male or female, depending, regardless of their culture. So everybody either eat honey or they use honey for medical purposes. And I started listening more and more, or hearing more and more stories that how honey has been used as a medicine. So it's kind of increased my motivation, and honey has become my passion. So I would say about 12 years, 13 years, I'm involved with the honey. And even my toughest times in my life, like when I don't know how should I go into the political things, but when there was a political turmoil in Turkey in 2016, the stage coup attempt. So my university was shut down. I lost my academic position, with about 8,000 other academicians were laid off. So I ended up coming to the United States, and I was not prepared to start academia very quickly. So I had like very different jobs meanwhile, but I never lost my passion with honey, and I applied jobs that I can still teach about honey and learn about honey, and also do research about honey. So that's where I am right now. So after this many years.
So now, were you at all frustrated by how behind the United States is in their acceptance of honey as medicine? Or is there a big divide between the holistic practitioners compared to the scientific and institutional community? How does that challenge you with your work?
I mean, maybe I can give a little bit background which countries studies honey the most or do the research about honey. So New Zealand is number one because of Professor Peter Mullen in 1990. So New Zealand and Australia, I would say they have the highest number of publications about medicinal properties of honey, especially antimicrobial properties. And then there are several studies from Malaysia. So Malaysia is one of the first countries did the clinical trials in using honey in orthopedic surgeries, orthopedic centers. So in early 2000s. And then other countries took up on this. And then this is one of the first things that in the beginning of my class, I asked my students go to PubMed and then search for honey antibacterial, honey antioxidant, or honey medicine. So when they do their research, and they also told them affiliation, make it United States. So when they make it, there are thousands of papers, but when you limit it to United States, it is just a handful of papers that is published with the affiliation in the United States. So this kind of encouraged me that this is something that people of this country need to know, because US is there's a lot of honey is being produced in this country, and there's a lot of varieties again produced by the local beekeepers. So then I kind of devoted myself that I should find out which local honeys has more medicinal potential. So I first started in Michigan when I was at the Alma College in Michigan in 2017 or 2018 actually. I taught a class, bees and medicinal honey. It was a short-term summer class. So and it was kind of a very important turning point for me, because the beekeepers were very much willing to their honey to be analyzed. So we collected 150 honey samples in just a couple of months, and maybe 2 months. And then we analyzed those honey samples with my students in the class. And I found out buckwheat honey for the first time I came across to it. And I found that buckwheat honey is one of the most promising medical grade honeys. And it was very rich in antioxidants. So I was able to, discover one of the first medical grade honeys. And I know there are other studies about buckwheat, but not from Michigan buckwheat. It was from New England or other places. So then I came to San Antonio, Texas, and then I also get involved with Texas Beekeepers Association to collect honey samples. It was during the COVID time, but even it was the COVID time, I volunteered to work in the lab. And there's one professor from here, Professor Kelly Nash. So she opened up her lab to me, and then she helped me with the chemicals. So I was able to analyze Texan honeys when I was a high school teacher during the COVID time. So, and then I got the offer for the integrative biology department in 2022. So was I frustrated that US, the honey's medicinal value was not well known? Instead of frustration, I was surprised, and I saw this as an opportunity to spread the knowledge. So, and then since then, I've been visiting different conferences. I've been invited to ABF for the last 3 years. And I went to Eastern Apiculture Society last summer. And I also been involved in Chicago, and I'm traveling different places. And the most importantly, I was in Apimondia in Chile, Santiago last year. And it was the first time that somebody from US presented about medicinal honey, that local honey has medicinal value. So it was the first time that I was able to introduce to the global beekeeper organization that US or Texas has medical grade honeys in there produced by the local beekeepers. And then since then, I got more interactions with the international people too. So again, this is an opportunity, I believe, and there is a lot to do research about medicinal properties of local honeys. And for your second part of the question about holistic approach for the medicine versus the modern medicine, I don't think there is not a big gap as it used to be. So that gap is getting closer because medical doctors or the physicians or the health professionals are getting more interested about learning the holistic approach or the integrative medicine. And as you know, even under NIH, there is an organization, National Institute of Complementary and Integrative Medicine, which is helping to provide guidance and regulations about using integrative medicine or complementary medicine products to be used in the modern medicine today. So, and I believe this gap is getting shorter. And also the future generations are getting more interested in learning honey as for medicine. And I see a lot of interest from my students or from the students from different parts of the country, so that they are interested and they're asking questions about this.
Mm-hmm. So now, when you spoke with me down in Austin, I think you said that the Texas honey was outperforming some of the other regions of the United States. And we know that the honey is highly dependent upon the floral source. So can you explain what it is about what's going on in Texas that makes their honey so good as far as
Maybe
medicine?
maybe I should make not a correction, but maybe an edit. So I think I mentioned that some of the Texan honeys are all out-competing Manuka honeys, which is the well-known medical grade honey in the world. So some of the San Antonio honeys or like Hill Country honeys, they do have antimicrobial and antioxidant potential than the Manuka honeys that we analyze in our lab. So we have about 40 Manuka samples. But I don't have so much resource or so much samples from other states or from other regions that how those can be compared. Because when I compare Texan honey and Michigan honey, they both have medicinal potential. So they both have high antioxidant properties and antimicrobial properties. So again, it's not very easy to compare like statewide. But I would say, for example, within Texas, one region, which is the Hill Country in north of San Antonio and south of Austin. So Hill Country is like one of the highest medicinal potential honey centers or regions that I would say in the overall Texas among the 400 samples that we collected. So right now I have about 84 samples from California. So thanks to the California beekeepers, they invited me to give a talk in Alameda Country and then also in the Santa Clara. So we were able to collect samples from the local beekeepers in those two counties, northern Southern California, and now we are analyzing them for their bioactivity potential. So again, I don't have the results yet, but we will probably have the results by March or April, and we'll be able to publish them. So then this will give me a little bit better picture how the California honey and Texan honeys are comparable. And also, I'm planning to get more honey samples from like eastern side, especially to the EAS or maybe other locations of the US. So hopefully we can get more samples and we can analyze them and to have a fingerprint of the local honeys in different regions of Texas. But it's a pretty big project, and I'll probably need several people to work on this.
Mm-hmm. So I know that there are beekeepers watching and listening to this right now, wondering how they can get their honey to be included in the circle of the high-end medicinal value category of honey, right? So you mentioned buckwheat as one really strong source. Dr. Underwood is talking about the spotted lanternfly honeydew honey. Have you tested that at all?
Yes, we did. I mean, that's okay. How should I say? So that's another regional honey. So I shouldn't have skipped that, but that's one like spotted lanternfly honey. Most of them are collected from Pennsylvania, New Jersey area. That Dr. Robin Underwood, she collected those samples and shared them with me to analyze their bioactivity potential. So we found out again, majority of the spotted lanternfly honeys, they are highly antimicrobial. And some of them outcompete Manuka samples as well. And then they're also highly antioxidant. Again, I just got some results yesterday about total phenolic contents, and some of them are like very, very high. Some of them are the highest that I have ever tested in this lab. So their gallic acid equivalents are more than 200. So it was the first time I see more than 200. So which is, I mean, other than other samples. But anyway, so this is kind of like gave me an understanding that like spotted lanternfly honey is one of the strongest candidate to become medical grade honey of the US. Like Manuka honey of New Zealand, we can probably say spotted lanternfly honey of the US will be a very, very strong candidate to be considered as medical grade honey. But again, buckwheat honey is not very strong antimicrobial. They are mostly strong antioxidants. So again, we will continue to analyze sources. But one major problem with the sources is like when we have the honey, most of the beekeepers do not identify the nectar source because they don't know where their honeybees goes. Like there's not an easy way to track them. So that's why we will be collaborating with Penn State University for their DNA pollen biomarker analysis. So DNA meta-barcoding analysis, sorry. And then hopefully they can do the pollen analysis. I mean, the beekeepers send their samples to the Penn State for pollen DNA analysis, and we can do the bioactivity analysis. So by this way, we can have a better understanding of which pollen or which nectar sources have more medicinal potential.
So is pollen the only way to identify a honey source?
I mean, pollen and the DNA, because for spotted lanternfly honey, we only identify it because of the DNA from the insect. But other than that, we also have DNA from the bees. But again, it needs additional like technology to extract the DNA from, like it's called cell-free DNA, to extract DNA from the honeybees remnants or from their stomach and so forth. But yeah, it can be also identified about the source of honey. There's also volatile compounds inside the honey, like kind of when you smell them. So those volatile compounds can also tell us the source of the honey as well. But again, these are all fields that we need to get improved on those.
This is all really interesting. And I like the fact that this stuff is up to date. Like yesterday, you're mentioning samples that you've tested. I have another question about this. If it's proven to be a stronger source for medicine, this is for people, is it also better for the bees? In other words, these high medicinal value honeys, do the bees do better? Do they resist disease better? What's the impact on the bee itself?
I mean, that's a very good question, and the answer is yes. So there's a study that was published, I think, last year or 23, when I was getting prepared to present about medicinal plants or medicinal plants for medicinal honey. So I found out that there was a study in Azerbaijan. So they collected honey samples, and it's a very well organized and very well written text. So they collected honey samples from different elevations. From different hives. So they had some honey samples from high elevations in the mountainous area, and they also had honey samples from more flat, like prairies. So, and then when they compared where do these bees get their antioxidants, so they found out the higher the elevation, the higher the antioxidant potential was coming from those honeybee hives. So we know that, I mean, we know that the bees are very sterile and they are very careful about not to have any pathogens in their hives. So the most thing when especially the feral bees, when they find a new hive in an empty log or wood, so what they do first is they just cover it with propolis to avoid any fungal or bacterial infection that may cause that may come from the decomposed wood. So by this way, they are protecting their hive as they cover it with propolis, and then everything is kind of more sterile and safe and healthy inside them. So, and on the other hand, bees collect more antioxidant rich nectars from the upper elevations. And also we know that the trees on the upper elevations, they are more resistant when compared to the trees on the prairies or lower elevations, because those trees, they need to resist the freezing cold maybe, or they also resist the winds and all those things. So those trees are producing more secondary metabolites. And then those secondary metabolites such as phenolic acids or flavonoids or tannins or glycosides. So these are all also mostly offered in their bark or in their secretions, and also they are offered in their flowers. Like for example, chestnut is one of the high elevation trees. And in Turkey, chestnut honey is well known with its medicinal properties. And we mostly find chestnut tree on the high elevations of like northern Turkey. Or another one is oak tree. Again, we don't find oak trees very much on the prairies, but in the northwestern part of Turkey, which is the Istranca Mountains, like throughout Bulgaria. So they have lots of oak trees, and those oaks have aphids on them. They also have their own secretions. So the bees make the oak honey, and again, oak honey is one of the darkest honeys. Like it's almost the black honey, I would say. And then again, oak honey has been found to be one of the highest antimicrobial and antioxidant honeys available. So Tualang honey, for example, in Malaysia, it is mostly collected from high elevation and high elevated trees. So it's about 30 feet above the ground. So the bees make their hives, and the honey hunters, they collect this tualang honey or gelam honey from the top of the trees. And again, it is mostly found in the high elevations. So the high elevations provide more antioxidant, more antibacterial properties. And also, we know in hill country, although it's at a high elevation, there is not so much agriculture happening in the hill country of Texas. So, but we know that when there is not so much agriculture, the trees also become more resistant, or like naturally they are resistant to Texas drought. And those trees, again, they are producing a lot of secondary metabolites that makes them resistant to drought or dearth. And then when the bees collect the nectars from the hill country forage, and their honeys are becoming also more medicinal. So we can tell them, like, bees are collecting the nectar for themselves primarily, and then they store the honey extra, and then we collect those honeys for our medicinal use. So it is both beneficial for the bees and for human life.
This is really interesting. Okay, so somebody's listening. I know they've run out and they started planting chestnut trees and oak trees today. So now you mentioned the high tannin content. What about, so then black walnut trees and things like that? Do we know anything about those?
Okay, so only black walnut honey samples that I have is spotted lanternfly samples.
Right.
So, like the spotted lanternflies, they are sap feeders. So they go to the tree, and then they insert their mouthpiece and they suck the phloem, and they got the sugar out of the tree. And one of the most visited or most attacked trees is the black walnut. So by the spotted lanternfly honeys. So I assume, again, it's not very easy to find from the pollen source, because black walnut doesn't have pollen, as far as I know. So, and the only way that we find it is spotted lanternfly honey is because of the insect DNA. So it's also kind of our dilemma right now. How are we going to identify spotted lanternfly honey based on the pollen? It's very hard. So anyway, overall, like, I have some samples which I assume they are coming from black walnut trees, and they are pretty high in their antimicrobial and antioxidant potentials. So they are highly bioactive. That's what I can tell now.
Okay, so beekeepers, some of them are listening to this right now thinking, what could I plant this year that would provide my bees with a higher medicinal value to their honey? So we mentioned buckwheat. What else? Could you give us a short list of, if somebody had a field and they could plant it, what would be high on the list of things that would provide higher medicinal value to the honey?
I mean, as a cover crop, buckwheat is the best option, I would say. So because buckwheat has, as far as I know, it has a flowering season of almost 2 months. So they have a continuous flowering season, depending on the climate. So this is providing a lot of nectar source for the honeybees. But other than that, I mean, I don't have a full list, but I know the goldenrod honey is also a very good potential, and goldenrod is naturally occurring in every place, I believe, in most of the places in Texas. But in terms of the plants, I mean, there's something called it's called a fasulia, or I forgot the exact name, but there's a bee brush is one of them that they can do, or the sagebrush that can also be helpful. Again, I'm mostly talking about Texan trees. But yeah, these are like, I would say if they can get dark color honey from any of those plants, so they can keep planting more of those plants. So that's, in short, I would tell those.
Okay, so that's the next part of my question too, is you do mention because buckwheat honey, very dark, very strong aroma and everything. So is there a correlation with the color of the honey? Like these high medicinal value honeys, are they all dark, and do they have a lot of material in them?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, there's a correlation between the antioxidant potential and darkness, because this darkness of honey is mostly coming from phenolics and tannins. So, and these are the major source of antioxidant potential. So the darker the color of honey, the higher antioxidant potential. But in terms of antimicrobial activity, we could not find any correlation between the color of the honey and antimicrobial potential. So that's why I said yes and no. So, but what I recommend to the people when I have presentations, I always tell them, find a local beekeeper and get dark honey from the local beekeepers, like fall harvest mostly, and if possible, get the comb honey. So like comb honey, because it is sealed and it is sterile and nobody has touched it before. So the bees made the honey and sealed it. And as a consumer, you are the person who is opening for the first time after the bees has sealed it. So there's no exposure to air, or there's no heating, or there's no exposure to any other things or chemical or temperature changes that may affect the honey's property. So that's why comb honey is my favorite. And also dark honey is also another important property here. But I also would like to tell one thing. You can darken the honey by applying heat. So that's an important thing, because it needs to be naturally darker, not heated darker. So because there are some chemical reactions happening inside the honey due to the enzymes. So when you put the honey in like 100 Fahrenheit or above, so eventually these, like between 100 to 120, there are chemical reactions that can make the honey darker color. So, and the longer it stayed on those temperatures, the color will get darker. So it's not natural dark, but it is kind of a temperature based darkness.
Mm-hmm. So my next question is, once the honey is, you mentioned goldenrod. There's a whole bunch of different goldenrod species. But it also has a high propensity to, crystallize. Does the crystallization of the honey reduce or at all change its medicinal qualities?
Actually, no. Crystallization, as you know, it is a natural process, and it shows that the honey is natural. There is pollen in it and there's glucose in it. Because crystallization only occurs if there is enough pollen inside the honey, and those glucose molecules will attach to the pollen and they will start crystallizing. So, and as you mentioned, some of the honeys crystallize very early, like canola honey is crystallizing even in the comb before you extract it. Or some of the honeys, like sunflower honey or acacia honey, they crystallize within a month. But there are some honeys which don't crystallize for years, like oak honey is one of them. They don't crystallize. Even chestnut honey, they don't crystallize for a quite long time. So again, crystallization is a natural process, and it doesn't lose the properties, because most of the time when we get our samples, and it's room temperature, but sometimes our lab is cold, and we start seeing that the honeys are getting crystallized. So what we do is we just put them in a warm water bath and make sure that they are they're not completely dissolved, but dissolved enough that we can mix it and get a homogeneous sample, and that's how we analyze them. So again, crystallization do not change, as far as I know, do not change the medicinal potential of honey. Heating is the number one problem. I mean, heating is the one that changes the medicinal potential. But even freezing may not change the medicinal potential. I have not tried it directly, but in my experience, you can freeze honey and thaw honey and eat it as is. It doesn't change the taste of it, or it doesn't change the texture too much. And so probably it doesn't change the medicinal potential either.
So at what temperature does honey actually freeze? Because I know when we put it in the freezer, it's still it's not frozen, it's just at freezer temperatures. At what temperature does it actually freeze?
I don't know the answer for that, because
Okay.
I just put it in the freezer and take it out. And I mean, probably the wax, if you put the honey with the wax in it, it may freeze faster, I believe. Or again, I don't know.
Okay,
So
so and we want to warn the people that have honey that are listening to this. The real threat to your honey quality is the upper temperatures that you're exposing it to. So you mentioned putting it into a hot bath. What's the temperature that you're using for that?
Okay, so normally, like the temperature cutoff for the enzymes inside the honey to get denatured is 55 degrees Celsius, so which is almost 125 Fahrenheit. So this is the cutoff that your honey should not be heated or should not be warmer than 125 Fahrenheit. So, and other than that, like when you put your honey into a water bath, so depending on how fast the water is heating the honey, so we usually put them into like 65 to 70 Celsius, but we don't allow it to completely melt and then get the whole heat. So it's kind of heat is starting from the sides going to inside. So, but we just take it out as soon as it is ready to be mixed well.
Mm-hmm. So
So
you also
again,
mentioned that the
the
amount of
safe
time
temperature is 1 Fahrenheit.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, the highest temperature, highest safe temperature is like 120, 125.
Okay. And you also mentioned that the longer it's at those temperatures, the more detrimental it is to the honey.
Yes, the longer they stay in at that temperature, the darker the color will be because of the chemical reactions. And especially this is happening like in Texas or maybe in Arizona or Florida as well. Because when if you leave your honey inside the car, the interior temperature of the car is much higher than the outside temperature. Like if the outside 100 Fahrenheit, probably inside the car it is 120, 130.
Yep.
So that's kind of like heating the honey to a very high temperature that should not be remaining there. That's why honey should not be kept in the car in the hot weather.
Mm-hmm. Or a hot panel truck or anything like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not a
Those are
good
very
place.
good points. I'm going to ask you something that you might be surprised you, but I was talking to Dr. Underwood and she said something that you had mentioned about tooth enamel being
Yeah.
fortified by putting honey. Now, I was recently at the dentist and I said, "Hey, why aren't we putting honey on our teeth uh, at night without brushing our teeth?" You want to explain a little bit behind that because I had not heard that, but it also I can almost imagine why that might be good. Could you explain that to us? Why would we put honey on our teeth?
Okay, let me kind of explain a little bit about oral microbiome. So in our mouth, I mean, we have lots of pathogens. We have lots of microorganisms, and some of them are pathogens which can cause disease, like which can decay the tooth, but most of them are friendly for us. So we have a lot of bacteria that we need in oral microbiome for digestion or for the health benefit. So and honey has been known to support the good bacteria and harm or kill the bad bacteria or the pathogenic bacteria. So when we put the honey in our mouth, so basically, or if we leave the honey in our mouth, we expect, again, I don't have a direct experiment. The one experiment that my student has done in the dental school was she applied fluoride, honey, and some other chemicals to the tooth animals, which is like experimental tooth animals, and she found out the honey is like has the same effect or very similar effect with the fluoride. So in terms of animal degradation or protection. So again, from here, I assume or I propose that like if you put honey on your teeth at night, or maybe you know those bleachers or whatever you put on your mouth. So if you can find a way to keep the honey in your mouth for a while, it will help the good bacteria to thrive and will fight with the bad bacteria, which can cause like tooth decays. So that's how honey can help. Another one research that my students are doing right now is they are working on gingival fibroblast. So, you know, gingivitis or gum disease is a very common disease, especially after some age. So basically the gums on the teeth are receding because the tissue is getting lost. And then when it is cleaned from the tartar and so forth, so those people has lost most of their gum. So right now what we are looking is how does local high bioactivity honeys or medical grade honeys can help these gingival fibroblasts, like the cells that will fill the gum, so to quickly fill the gap or the wound of after the cleaning. So basically people will like we will recommend based on our data, we will recommend that after gingival cleaning or gum cleaning, so people can apply local bioactive honey into the area. So this will enhance the healing of the gums and make it fill the blanks much faster. So that's how it can help. And again, another study is like, it's not the honey, but they put propolis in the root canal. So because propolis, they embed the propolis into some kind of foam that will hold it in it, and they put a very small foam, and then they put it in the root canal area after they clean the root of the teeth, and then they put it there because it is anti-inflammatory and it is a wound healing. So, and it's also antimicrobial, so it doesn't allow any infection or inflammation to occur in the root canal once the root canal is done or crown is before it is put on there.
So you're saying
So
that it stays in there.
it stays. Propolis is
It
released
stays
slowly, and as long as you have a biocompatible foam or gel or whatever that which can stay in there, so it will be just dissolved with the propolis.
So do you find a lot of support for that in the dental department or dental education?
I mean, yes, I have a collaborator in Morocco, and we just have worked on a paper that he's also DDS PhD. So he's a very valuable scientist and dentist. So he has done a lot of like a good amount of research on this. And again, we might have some, I don't say resistance or negligence that like maybe the dentist in here may be hesitant to use that. But again, we already have like already have some foams that are used in the dentistry for different dental procedures. So instead of using a chemical in it or antimicrobial agent in it, we can simply put honey or propolis, and it will do the same job or even better job by with different properties. Again, when I talk to some dentists, they agree with that or they want to try it. But again, I didn't have so much exposure to the dental world.
Mm-hmm. And I think I want to be clear to the listeners and viewers that we're not handing out dental advice right now. We're just talking
Medical
about what's being looked at, what's being tested. We haven't finalized, and we definitely don't represent the American Dental Association. We're not telling you to go out and stuff honey in your mouth, but there again, we also can't stop you from doing it. So whatever you think you want to
one
try.
disclaimer, yes.
Um, so the other thing is, what is its doctor? I keep bringing up, Robin, but because someone had a traditionally treated open wound situation on their leg
Yes.
that had persisted for an extended amount of time, and then when honey was used as part of the topical treatment, the
Mhm.
healing was remarkable. Can you give an example of how honey is being used in probably the most successful or the most dramatic way in medicine?
I mean, honey is mostly used as a wound healing agent and still is one of the best wound healers. So there is according to clinical trials, and again, I listened to one of the apitherapy leaders from Dr. Stefan Stangacci. He mentioned, so honey can heal more than 90% of the wounds that are not healing with conventional medication.
Mhm.
So it's a great percentage because, and he said that that 10% is mostly the people who might have stinging reaction when the honey is applied there because of the low pH. But other than that, honey heals the wound earlier or later, but most of the time earlier than conventional treatments. So honey is number one wound healing agent, I would say. And even today, honey is used in the burn clinics and wound clinics in different parts of the US. I mean, I keep hearing from nurses, from medical doctors. I even gave a talk at Texas Geriatric Society's annual meeting, and I heard from several people that they say, yes, we are using honey, or yes, we will use honey after listening to this talk. So it is becoming more and more approved and accepted. Honey is a wound healing agent or wound healing device, so it can help. So in terms of spotted lanternfly honey, I also have a very like before Robin. Actually, I gave it to one of my friend's daughter that she has a non-healing neuropathic wound in her foot for about 8 months. So 8 months, she had a pretty large wound. I think it was about, I would say about 2 inch wide and in like about 2 inch diameter, and it was deep. You can see the bone under her feet. So it was such a big wound, and then they keep trying different medications for about 8 months. And because she is neuropathic, she doesn't feel any pain. So then I asked him, like after I gave a talk in Austin, Texas, like before TBA, and then he approached me and then he said, "Okay, can I try, biomedical honey or like a medical grade honey? If you have some, I'd like to try it on my daughter." I said, "Okay." So he came to San Antonio. I gave him a one jar of spotted lanternfly honey that I got extra last year from one of the donors. And then he applied it, but within less than 10 weeks, I think week 9. So the wound was like more than 90% of the wound was healed. So non-healing for 8 months, within 9 weeks, it was almost healed. And again, we have lots and lots of clinical trials, like since early 2000s. We have several clinical trials that are showing honey is used for wound healing. And even the Cochrane collaboration or Cochrane reviews in 2018, they made a clinical review meta-analysis, I think, and they found out like most of the clinical trials are lacking proper regulations, but in even then they did not deny the value of honey that or the the potential of the honey for wound healing on different clinical trials. So it is being used, it is being more and more accepted, and we are having more local honeys that has the potential to be used for these wound healing applications.
Mm-hmm. So how does honey that's produced by an apiary or a commercial beekeeper ultimately end up being classified as medical grade honey? What are the steps to get it to that level?
I mean, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, we don't have any regulations in the US for medical grade honey, but CE, I mean, the European Union, they have they have fortified their regulations only this year, actually, that how it can be considered as a medical grade, like for any plant or any medicinal thing, how they can be considered as medical grade. So, but overall, for a honey to become considered as medical grade, it needs to pass some criteria. First of all, it needs to be from how should I say? Like they need to have physicochemical criteria which shows it's honey, like color, pH, moisture, and pollen existence analysis. And then we need to analyze them for antimicrobial potential and antioxidant potential. And we come up with a bioactivity level of formula that I have developed in my lab, that by using these physicochemical characteristics, antimicrobial activity, antioxidant activity, by using these values, I came up with a formula which is described as biological activity level. So the higher the biological activity level, the higher medicinal potential. So then this honey, before to be used for medical purposes, it needs to be gamma sterilized, because there are some endospores which may remain in the honey, and these endospores can cause infection. Again, it's a possibility. We didn't see any infections, but it's a possibility. So to avoid this, honey is medical grade honey is gamma sterilized, and then it needs to be packed properly according to the medical regulations. And by the way, FDA has approved Manuka honey as medical grade honey in 2008. So in the US, medical grade honey is available to be used and to be developed and for medical devices. So FDA has already approved Manuka honey for this purpose.
And so you mentioned it had to be sterilized gamma. So we're talking gamma radiation, gamma flux.
Yes, gamma radiation.
Are you familiar with that process or how they're doing that?
I mean, there are some sterilization there are some sterilization labs. So what we did in Turkey, not in here, but we did was like we put the honey into large containers and we sent to them, and they gamma sterilized it. They applied the gamma rays directly to the containers, and it doesn't heat honey. It doesn't change the bioactivity, because there's also a study showing how gamma sterilization can change the bioactivity levels, and it's very negligible. So, and then they send it back to us with the certificate that these are gamma sterilized. So we cannot do it in our lab. We need a radiation certification.
Right. Yeah, you would have to be under the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and gamma radiation has no energy source. It's a radioactive isotope that's fixed and shielded, where X-rays would be an energy source that then we would expose them to X-ray, but you need a much more powerful system. So a gamma radiation source, an isotope like that, travels farther, no energy, just the normal decay of whatever material. They might be using a cobalt source or something like that. But that's very interesting that it neutralizes the activity without altering the honey. Is there something that really surprised you as far as the medical benefit, something you hadn't thought of that people are using honey for that benefits people?
I mean, it's mostly a historical one. It's also a little bit adult content, I would say, but honey has been used as a spermicide. So as a use for birth control in the history. So that was one of the most surprising information that I learned. But also honey was mostly mixed with some other ingredients in different cultures, and still it fortifies the power of the honey. So these are some of the most interesting things. But again, honey fascinates me every single day, I would say. So when I read books or when I listen from the people that are studying about honey, and especially when I join apitherapy conferences, so like the power of honey, the healing power of honey is really mesmerizing me. And nowadays, like my students came up with some ideas that honey can be used for Alzheimer's, to prevent it, also treat it, because Alzheimer's is caused because of oxidative stress mostly. And then honey is very rich in antioxidants. So if the senior people or people who are prone to Alzheimer's, if they consume honey regularly, they can be prevented from the development of Alzheimer's in their brain nuts. But again, we don't have any clinical data for it, or even it's very hard to try this. Or again, honey can be used for treatment of some different neurological diseases like depression and anxiety, and for also can help with the sleep medicine. So again, all these things needs to be researched. But again, honey keeps fascinating me every single day, I would say.
Okay, I'm going to ask another question. A lot of people recommend honey for those who suffer seasonal allergies. Have you found any correlation in the consumption of honey and the reduction of allergy stresses that people go through every single spring and fall?
Well, yeah, I also, I mean, as I moved to San Antonio, I started to have allergies. I didn't have allergies in my life before. So, especially in some places, we have all these cedar, elm, or ash trees, so they cause allergies. So, first of all, technically, technically, it is not possible honey or any honey to initiate or desensitize allergies, because the amount of allergen to be used for desensitization is a very high amount. Like the immunologist or allergen medical doctors, they use a lot of allergen at small amounts to desensitize a person's allergies. So honey doesn't have this much of pollen in it to make it. And the second reason is honeybees are collecting the pollens from the plants which are like animal pollinated. So all the allergens that we're getting exposed to are wind pollinated pollens. So like again, cedar, elm, or ash trees. So honeybees don't collect pollen from them. So for two reasons, like for two of these technical reasons, the honey coming from local bee hives may not be helpful for the allergies. But on the other hand, we have seen that local honeys has more medicinal potential when compared to the grocery store honeys. So we analyzed more than 40 honey samples in our lab, compared grocery store honeys and local honeys. And we found local honeys are about 4 times more bioactive when compared to the grocery store honeys, like 400%, I would say. So which clearly shows that local beekeeper honeys has more potential to help our immune system. So, and allergies are because of a reaction of our immune system. So if we can modulate our immune system to get prepared for allergies or to be stronger, then local honey can help more for the local allergens. But again, it's very hard to correlate it directly because of these two technical impossibilities or technical problems.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say about those who use honey and say, this is a problem with our social media these days, people that have diabetes and insulin problems, they're being told by a lot of people that honey will not impact that. What do you know about diabetes and raw honey?
Okay, so raw honey or the most of the honeys. So again, first I would like to reiterate, not every honey is created equal. So for this reason, not every honey will have the same effect on diabetes or wound healing or any other diseases. So what I would tell is like honey, some of the honeys, and again, most of the dark color honeys, they have low glycemic index. So as you know, glycemic index is the one that is propagating increasing the glucose content or in our glucose level in the blood. So low glycemic index food are mostly recommended for these diabetic patients, so to control better the glucose levels. So some of the honeys, they have low glycemic index and they can be used safely by the diabetic patients. But most of the honeys, especially light color honeys or grocery store honeys, I cannot guarantee any of them to become low glycemic index. And I don't have a measurement. I don't have a technique to measure the glycemic index. It needs to be done on the animal studies or like on the animal models to see how it is increasing. But I have also several personal anecdotes from my beekeeper friends, which carries those like arm devices. So what they do is they consume their own honey and they watch their glucose level from the Bluetooth on their cell phones. And they say that even after 2 hours, my glucose level is still not high. It's still in tolerable levels. So they show or they claim that their honey did not increase their glucose level despite their diabetes. So again, this is I don't want to say hit and miss, but it is a field that really needs to be researched with well-established clinical and animal studies.
That is really interesting because I could imagine if I were someone who couldn't eat sugar because of diabetes, but yet if I could find a honey that I'm able to eat or sweeten my food with, what a bonus. Because first of all, we shouldn't be eating the sugar in the first place.
Yes.
So that's
But this is really sweet. And then
but that comes up. And again, I just want to caution people, if you're going to try some kind of raw honey and you are diabetic, do that in concert with your practitioner, your medical professional. We're not telling you to go out and experiment, but that's a very telling anecdote there where someone has a monitoring system. They have that app on their phone and they can see what their blood glucose levels are and see what their reaction is when they take it. Maybe it's a
I think
slow release sugar or something. Yeah.
a clinical trial can be established on this. Like, so with the people who has the glucose monitoring, and then they consume local honey or grocery store honey, and they see how it is differing, like in a controlled manner. So,
Yeah.
and then it can give us an idea.
I really hope somebody does that soon. So it almost feels like we can't move fast enough on a lot of this stuff because there's so much to do. And do you find that there are a lot of other researchers doing what you're doing? Are you collaborating? How's that going?
I mean, I'm trying to collaborate with as many scientists as I can. Like, for example, I collaborate with Professor Richard Wilson from University of Houston for pollen DNA analysis. He was one of the pioneers. I mean, he has did a lot of bioinformatics studies for the Department of Homeland Security to prevent the honey fraud. And then I also collaborate with Robin, definitely for more than a year at the Penn State. So we are working on the spotted lanternfly honey. And again, I also collaborate with people on different universities, like with Texas A&M, with USDA Bee Research Labs. So so we also collect samples from different regions as well. So more collaboration is happening, but my understanding is that like I'm doing this very actively last 4 years, I would say, like or 3 years. I'm collecting honey samples. So and also analyzing the honey at UTSA lab. But we are the only lab in the whole country that is analyzing honeys for medicinal potential. So for the antimicrobial, antioxidant potential. So that is, again, it's something that we are really proud of, that we are doing this. And we are like, again, this is an opportunity that we can do more honey samples. But at the same time, we'd love to see more researchers, more scientists, to get into the field of honey's medicinal potential. And again, maybe you can have a honey institute or honey research center in the nation, and then we can promote the local honey, like local U.S. honey, to become the medical grade honey and become a leader in the world for this purpose.
Okay, give me an idea, because I know somebody's going to be mad if I don't ask this question. A quart of honey right now in the state of Pennsylvania goes for about $22. If someone had the quality of the honey that could make it through the medical grading and be considered medical grade honey, do we have an idea of what those things would sell for, or what the producer would see as far? I realize that the other end is probably going to be expensive, but for the producer, what would medical grade honey earn them?
I would say, like, look at the example of Manuka. So when Manuka was started in 1990s, it was about $20 per kilo, which is about 2.2 pounds. So by early 2000s, like within a decade, so the price has gone all the way up to $2,000 per kilo. So it's about like 100 times more expensive because of the research that was done on Manuka, and it was only medical grade honey that was on the international market. So then the price has been now adjusted. It's about still like if you buy Manuka from those wholesale markets like Costco or other places, the price is still pretty high. I mean, it can be 10 to 14 times more expensive compared to the local honey sold in the farmers market. So this shows the potential, but I don't know how the market will change. I mean, how many products will be introduced, and then who will lead the market, and then how these, like, how does the FDA will approach this? These are some unknowns, but it is a road to be walked. It is a road that we need to start walking, and then we need to, to establish it as because we have a very high potential in by the local beekeepers in this country. So we just need to establish the foundation and institution for this, and start doing this as a as the major as a major goal.
Mhm. Can you basically describe what the best way to harvest or process honey is that would have the least impact on its quality?
So can you come again? I got distracted.
So so someone's
Sorry.
got an apiary, they want to extract honey from a beehive. What is the best way to maintain its original properties? What's the best way to harvest that honey and have the lowest impact on its value as medicine?
I mean, the best way to protect honey is keeping the comb,
Hmm.
because comb is when the bees really make the honey and they seal it, and it is not processed by anybody else. It is not, safe. And when you need, that then you can extract the honey from the comb and use it like within a short amount of time. So that's the best. But again, this is not the ideal. I understand. This is the ideal, but it's very hard to realize this because we need to make like large compounds of these. So in that case, honey is should be stored in the glass because glass is more protective, but and there is less microplastics in it. But what we see in the Manuka market, they are all sold in almost black or dark brown containers. So we don't see any Manuka in glass. We don't see in Manuka in clear containers. So so again, this is a kind of a guidance or example that how the honey should be stored and sold to the consumers. Because people may not like the taste of the medical grade honey, like spotted
Right.
lanternfly honey.
Yeah.
Like more than 50% of the people hate it.
Yeah.
And the reason is, again, it doesn't taste like honey. But Manuka was the same. People were feeding Manuka to their animal farms. So because Manuka didn't taste like honey, didn't look like honey, didn't smell like honey. But when you put them into a container, dark container, and promote it as a medical honey, then people are eating the honey as a medicine, not as honey in their every day.
So actually, we're probably gonna wrap up. We've covered just about everything there is. Is there anything on your mind that we haven't covered that you would like to share about before we say goodbye?
I think, yeah, we mostly covered almost everything. But again, I really would like to thank my students, especially Honey Pathway students, that they are helping me a lot. I mean, to analyze these honeys for their medicinal potential. And again, the best thing that I really enjoy teaching this class is most of my students are pre-health professionals. So they become future doctors, future physicians, or dentists. So I believe this will be a great addition, and I hope this knowledge can be shared to more and more generations or more youth that they can grasp the idea, and so that our beekeepers average age can also go down, and then we can have like more beekeepers all around the country looking for or producing medical grade honey. So I believe this will be a great opportunity for our nation.
Hmm. I agree. And do you want to share what's the next conference that you'll be attending as a presenter?
Okay. Actually, this weekend I'm going to Minnesota for the Bee Day by the Fond du Lac University, or maybe I didn't pronounce properly. But I'm also planning to go to EAS this summer. And maybe I should also give the good news that we will be organizing the Global Epitherapy Convention in San Antonio, Texas, on November 7 to 11. So, and I'll be organizing committee, and then we are organizing this as a One Health and honeybees. So, because One Health is becoming a more and more like approved concept, so we will be having One Health and honeybees, the global convention of the epitherapists. So we will have speakers from different parts of the world, and especially from the US as well, like through the American Epitherapy Society. So we will have this conference in San Antonio in the first week of November.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
fantastic. Yeah, I'm glad I asked. So For those that are watching or listening, you'll find the links to everything that he's just described down in the video description, and we will update those as the year progresses. So I want to thank you so much for your time. This was very interesting, and I think people are going to get a lot of value out of this interview. So I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yep. And that concludes another episode of Interviews with Experts. I hope you learned something new from today's discussion. If you find value in the content I produce, please take a moment and subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. I invite you to visit the video description for updated links to some of the information referenced during the interview. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this has been The Way to Be.